Hey everyone, back for my first video in a long while. I have no excuses, I've just been lazy. Today I wanted to talk about, it's a topic that's kind of touchy, and just in advance, if you can't deal with like topics surrounding violence, murder, racism, etc., then this probably isn't the video for you. I'd recommend you find another video because it might talk about these things a little bit. So what I wanted to talk about is the question of if heavy metal music is violent. And I think that it's a bit of a silly question. And here's why. So the first reason I believe is it's silly is because metal music is just a broad series of musical techniques. All it is a series of musical techniques. And saying that listening to music with a series of musical techniques is going to make you go out and kill somebody or make you more at risk to go out and kill somebody is a bit dumb. And some might point to the fact that metal music is oftentimes very aggressive and its lyrics very violent. But the problem with that is some metal music doesn't even have any lyrics. Like neoclassical, neoclassical metal, that stuff focused on virtuosity, very rarely has lyrics. And even then though, the lyrics surrounding heavy metal music aren't necessarily always violent. Heavy metal music lyrics can talk about anything from love, the weather, breaking up with your girlfriend, although that's not very common, philosophy, and anything. And some might say that I'm kind of being deceptive here because metal music, although yes, not all metal music's lyrics are inherently violent, some of the lyrics are very violent, and this does crop up quite a bit with heavy metal music. But I just find this a bit ridiculous because, if people say listening to aggressive lyrics is more likely to make you violent, well, here's the thing. Let's take a look at Scream Bloody Gore by Death. The lyrics on this album are extremely violent. This is death metal. This is, this along with Possessed, it's debated which was the first real death metal album. Some people say this, some people say it's Possessed Seven Churches. Chuck Schuldiner, who's the head man, the guitarist and vocalist of this band, says it was Possessed Seven Churches, not Scream Bloody Gore. But anyway, the lyrics on this album are extremely violent, and yet Chuck Schuldiner himself was a very peaceful dude. He was an animal lover, just a generally peaceful person. And yet the lyrics on this album are extremely violent. Let's take a look in contrast to, say, In the Night Side Eclipse by Emperor. The lyrics on this album are much less violent, much less overtly violent. They are There's definitely a sinister aura to them for sure. I won't deny that. And there's some references to Satanism here and there and all that thing. But here is the thing. I don't think like Satanism per se is inherently violent, although definitely the way. But back on the specific topic I was going to talk about, Emperor's lyrics are much less overtly aggressive and violent, and yet their drummer stabbed a gay person to death. And one of their guitarists went to jail for burning down a church. So if we were to follow that violent lyrics makes people violent, you would think that it would be the other way around. You'd think it would be the guy who was the singer and guitarist of Death would be going to jail for stabbing the homosexual to death, burning down churches, etc. But it was actually Emperor. And this brings me next to my point. A less silly way to like a different question that asks that makes you look a little bit less silly is, does heavy metal culture promote violence? Because like I said, metal is just a series of musical techniques. But this question is still kind of like a bit silly because heavy metal music is a very broad genre. Like, if you don't believe me, just go listen to Iron Man by Black Sabbath, and then Hammer Smash Face by Cannibal Corpse. Those are both metal songs, and yet those two bands sound nothing alike. Like, at all. So, an even less ridiculous question would be, do certain, because heavy metal has so many like subgenres, do the cultures of certain heavy metal subgenres promote violence? And I would say yes, but it has nothing to do with like the music or the lyrics per se. It just has to do with the culture in the individual scenes. So so the death metal culture, this is a death metal album, is very tame usually. Of course there's going to be some people in death metal culture that are going to be violent, and so on, but overall the culture in death metal is pretty tame, pretty mellow, pretty accepting. Whereas, say, the culture in black metal, specifically in Norway during the 90s, was not that way. It was very conservative, socially conservative. I'm not talking about neoliberalism. I'm just talking about it was socially conservative to the extreme. Depending on which band, a lot of it was openly racist, and so on. So I'd say metal music itself is not violent. Certain subcultures within certain metal scenes can definitely, the culture can be violent. If you look at black metal, the fans in black metal that I've interacted with, unfortunately, and this is where things get really wild, you'll see people who are blatantly anti-Semitic, who are sometimes outright Holocaust deniers, Hitler supporters, and stuff like that. But again, like, I don't want people to run around thinking that everyone who's into black metal is like a white nationalist, because um, black metal is enjoyed by people around the world. Um, but there is definitely within black metal subculture a general problem of violence. But like, to say that like a genre as a whole, which is just a series of musical techniques, is going to make someone more violent, or that lyrics, if they're violent, are going to make someone more violent, is really like short-sighted and dumb. Because, like, yeah. So I thought I'd just weigh in on my thoughts on the whole violence and heavy metal music, and this is just take one. I probably didn't articulate myself properly, and I missed this or that, but this is how I feel about the idea of violence, like certain genres of music being violent as a whole. Like, I know this gets directed towards rap music as well, because talks about drugs, crime, murder, gang violence, that sort of thing. But with rap music, nah, I don't consider that violent. And another thing, like, this actually applies to both metal and rap. A lot of the accusations of metal music being and rap music being violent comes from Christian fundamentalists, which is pretty ironic. Because, I mean, look at some of the things that Christianity has been responsible for. Yes, I'm well aware that not all Christians are, violent. Obviously, I'm not silly. But, like, a lot of genocides have been done in Christianity's name, and in, like, the name of organized religion in general. So for those same people to turn around and point the finger at metal and rap music for being violent, when, like Christians in particular, to point the finger at metal and rap music when they were putting indigenous people in residential schools where these children were horribly sexually and physically and emotionally abused, killed, as many know, with the mass graves spotted in Canada of these indigenous children. For them to point the finger at metal music just seems very odd. So in summary, metal music doesn't, I don't believe, causes violence, but there's a propensity to violence in certain metal subcultures, which have nothing to do with the actual genres itself. It has to do with the socioeconomic, geopolitical, context, the countries and their values, and their problems in which these genres were developed. And I think that's where the problems come in, with the racism in metal and the bigotry and some of the violence. So yeah, this is just kind of my thoughts on, like, violence in metal music, or metal and violence and metal culture. And yeah, have a good day.